A plain gray background fills the entire frame with no visible objects, people, or text.
For us to learn from different individuals with different backgrounds, different areas of expertise. And today we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. William Locke from Hastings College. In the past, he has been a junior high teacher. He is currently a professor of teacher education at Hastings College, which is just about 1.5 hours west of Lincoln, Nebraska. In addition to teaching at the college, he also has led historic trail trips over the past 20 years, and those are for teachers. And in June, he has done most recently, some tours and courses on the Lewis Clark Trail. Today, he will be presenting a program entitled, Did Old Toby Know the Way? Would you please help me welcome Dr. Will Locke.
I hope they have the sound adjusted. They do. They are very good at this, and I want to thank the National Park Service and all the other agencies that have collaborated to do this wonderful project, which we've probably all heard about. Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the back? Okay. As a college professor, we're used to 50 minutes. We're used to maybe students in the back with the ball caps and their sunglasses nodding off. Well, the students at Hastings College are great. In fact, I remember one of the last courses that I taught in May. I heard students talking after the class, and they were trying to decide what to do since it was Friday. What were we going to do Friday night? And one person said, oh, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll flip a coin. If it's heads, we'll get dates and go to the movies. If it's tails, we'll just go stay and hit the bars after. Oh, well, we'll just go stay. And if it lands on edge, we'll go home and stay. So thank you very much to Omahans, Nebraskans, all of you who have this interest in the Lewis and Clark saga, participants of the Lewis and Clark Trails classes that I have led over the years. We call them survivors, and there are some here, Mouth of the Platte folks, and there are some of them here. I've spoken to them. And Pat Jones, who helped to arrange for my being here, and what a beautiful day and beautiful setting to be celebrating the American Odyssey that we call the Lewis and Clark Expedition. Now, this presentation is about a part of the trail that perhaps some of you have not heard so much about. It's the part of the trail where they were on land and in the high Bitterroot range of mountains, one of the most difficult range of mountains in the country. And I will describe the difficulties that they faced and difficulties that nearly defeated the expedition. Now the question is, did Old Toby know the way? Did Old Toby know the way? Old Toby, also known as Swooping Eagle, we think, guided them through this difficult terrain. But some imply that he lost the way at Lost Trail Pass, lost the way on the Lolo Trail, and thus added to the hardships that the course suffered. I'm going to disagree with that and claim, based on the reading of the journals and of the experts, that is Moulton and Fazio and others, that Old Toby did know the way as far as he had traveled, and that where they were lost was more of a contrast in cultural attitudes. I mean that Lewis and Clark were determined to go west to the Pacific before winter. And so they wouldn't always follow Old Toby's advice to follow the easier trail. Lewis and Clark, when faced with a challenge or told that they couldn't do it, only became more determined, right? Absolutely. Tell them when it couldn't be done, and by golly, they would do it. Undaunted Courage, the title of the famous book, explains that attitude. Okay. Now, where my ideas about Old Toby really took shape was when I walked the trail. And I'm kind of a hiker, biker, climber type of person. And so I've had the opportunity to hike many of the rugged areas of the trail on the Montana-Idaho border. And when you hike, when you walk in the footsteps, every few feet there are light bulbs flashing. Oh, I see what they were talking about. Oh, now I get it. So that's what I can share with you is this travel through the difficult bitter roots. Now let me kind of show you where first, how many of you have heard of the Shoshone tribe? Of course. How many of you have heard of Kamiaway, the chief and brother of Chicago leader? Okay. How many of you have heard of Old Toby? Good. Great. And how many of you have heard of Lemhi Pass, which was named later? Now, it's going to be it's confusing for me because I really want to use the original Shoshone names. Like Weabe is the Shoshone name for Lemhi Pass. But that confuses people, so I may go back and forth. Probably more often I'll use both names, like Lolo Trail and Nimiku. How many have heard of the Lolo Trail? Also known as Nimiku. How many have been on Lemhi Pass? Wonderful. And Lost Trail Pass. And Lolo Pass. And the Lolo Trail. Any of you walked all of the Lolo Trail? Quite a bit of it? A little bit of it? Okay. Let me show you where we're at. Okay. The first part of my talk, appropriate? Is that when I'm supposed to quit? Begins at the gates of the mountains. And we travel down the Jefferson River, up the Jefferson River. And Lewis and Clark are seeing snow on the high mountains as they move through this area. Then they get to what today we call Clark Canyon Reservoir, south of Dillon. How many of you have been there? Put that on your list. You can camp there or stay in Dillon at the hotels. Then, that's where they met. Kamiaway, the Shoshone, and Old Toby became their guide. Then they worked their Old Toby led them north over Lost Trail Pass, down the Bitterroot Valley, which was easy. And then they turned west up the Lolo Nimiku Trail, and that got very, very tough. Okay. So that gives you the location of my presentation. And then there'll be slides to show the trail. And please, though there'll be time for questions and answers during the talk, ask me anytime. I love that. We'll begin with two questions. Number one, was Old Toby qualified to lead the expedition? Kamiaway thought so. He said, he's our best. He knows that country to the north of the Salmon River, is what he means. And Lewis wrote in his journal that he was very intelligent and that he much pleased Clark. Much pleased Clark. The second question, did Old Toby really know the entire route? Now by the entire route, I mean from there it is. From Lamni Pass, can you see that pointer? I'll wiggle it around there. To Weah Prairie on the other side of the Bitterroots, the heart of the Nez Perce country. Yes, he knew the route over Lost Trail Pass. Yes, he knew the route through the Bitterroot Valley. That's Hamilton and Darby, the location of major forest fires in the last few years that have been on national TV. Yes, he knew the eastern part of the Lolo Trail west of Missoula. But after the headwaters of the Lac Saw on the Idaho side of Lolo Pass, I say, wait just a minute. Because that's Nez Perce country. Shoshones and Nez Perces were enemies. Would it have been safe for Old Toby to have traveled the western part of the Nimiku Trail into the heart of Nez Perce country? I don't see how. I just don't see how. To the headwaters of the Lac Saw, to fish for salmon, yes. Now, my argument is that Old Toby knew exactly where he was going up to the fishing areas of the Lac Saw. After that, they didn't need a guide. The problem was not knowing the trail, because hundreds of Nez Perce horsemen went back and forth once or twice a year. That leaves a strong trail even in the snow. The problem was they were hungry, they were cold, they were exhausted. The weather was absolutely lousy. That was the problem. That wasn't Old Toby's fault. Now, to set the stage for the meeting with Old Toby, let's join the expedition at the gates of the Rocky Mountains. How many have been at the gates of the Rocky Mountains near Helena? Terrific, wonderful place, and recommend it to you. So, about in here, Lewis was beginning to become desperate to find the Indians. He'd been looking for them all the time since leaving the Mandan villages. Had seen none, some signs, but no Indians. So he's looking off. The direction they were going, we're going to pretend that we're going upriver. That's upriver. So they're looking off to the west and they see snow. Now this is late August, mid to late August. They see snow on the high peaks. Wow, we got to get across these mountains. This is going to be tougher than we thought. They look off to the left and they see the Tobacco Root Mountains. And Willow Creek comes down and they name it Philanthropy because they were Masons and that was a Mason sign of virtue. But no Indians. They look to the right again. The Pioneer Mountains, looming up with snow on the tops. But no Indians. Out comes the beautiful river. They almost take it. Today it's called the Big Hole. They named it the Wisdom, another Masonic virtue. On up the river, now Lewis is on ahead now with his best trackers. He is anxious. He's not sleeping well. He's worried, and he was a worrier anyway. You know that. And now he sees mountains to the south. The Bitterroot Range. More snow, but no Indians. He comes to a fork in the Jefferson River. This is what it looks like today in late winter. To the left in that picture is where the true source of the Missouri lies. It's called Red Rock River, and the farthest source of the Red Rock River is Hell Roaring Creek which I've been fortunate to go to, and I wish I had time to show you the slides of the highest springs of the Missouri River. That river begins at Elroy Creek in Elroy Canyon, about 20 miles, crow-fly miles, west of West Yellowstone, Montana. They didn't take that way because they sent Drew here, and the trail faded. Now, Jefferson said, find the source of the Missouri. But which is going to take precedence? Take that river, the stronger river, but the Indian Trail fades? Or go right, where the trail is strong? They've got to have horses. That means they've got to find the Shoshones. So they went right, to the right of that picture. That is Horse Prairie Creek, one of the great ranch areas, hay meadows of the world. You should go there just to see the way they construct the gates out of lodgepole pine. And up they went. And I'm shortening a lot of this, but at one point, Lewis, with his glass, spies a lone rider. And he calls out. Do you know what he calls out? Have you read it? Tababone, he calls. He thinks it means friend. But something got lost in the translation. It meant stranger. Tababone. And the rider wheels and heads back up the creek. He is upset, and Lewis could get upset. Clark was steady and even. Lewis could get upset. He was so determined. And he blamed his trusted trackers, Drew and Hugh McNeil. They said, guys, you should have pulled back and let me advance. Now he was really worried. But did he turn around? No. He finally got to what he called the source of the Missouri. And let me show you that. Now he's about to meet Old Toby. This is what he called the most distant fountain. August 12th. The road took us to the most distant fountain of the mighty Missouri, in search of which we have spent so many toilsome days and restless nights. That's the place. Now, I've worked with the Park Service. I've hiked every mile of that stream. The highest spring is actually several miles further up, where it's very hard to get to, and where you can't get there just as a tourist. I mean, you've got to be a serious hiker. But this is where we think he was talking. And Hugh McNeil said how grateful he was to reach the source of the mighty Missouri, the farthest source, and get a cold drink. So Lewis kept going even though he had not found Indians. This is one of the highest springs. That's the map that I based some of my conclusions on. Okay. Now this is one of my great favorite slides of my life, because those are my two grandsons from Wichita. And see that tree that's had the top broken off by lightning? That is a Douglas fir. Forest Service people call them Doug firs. When you get down and stand underneath it, it is that big around. Folks, that was there when the Corps of Discovery walked up the hill. That's where they walked, up to Lemon. That's where Lewis walked. And what did he see? That's what he saw. He said, from which I discovered immense ranges of high mountains still to the west of us, with their tops partially covered with snow. He could have said, no Northwest Passage, and turned around. He could have said, the end of the American dream for the Northwest Passage. Instead, he went on down across those lower hills and met two women digging for roots at the end of the season. They kneeled to be tomahawked, to be killed, and instead he gave them face paint, beads, threads. They were overjoyed, ran, and it wasn't long before horsemen, 50 or 60, they debate the number, rode up, hugged them all. It was mosquito season, so they were covered with bear grease, and the national hug was like this. And Lewis had got heartily tired of the national hug. But he found the Indians. And of course, you know, the coincidence, the Sacagawea's brother, Kamehameha, was the chief. I mean, there's a Dickensian connection, if ever. And they traded for horses. They traded for horses. Now, but where did they go through all that? Where do they go? So Kamehameha gives them a geography lesson. And he says, the salmon goes north and west. And it goes to I'm quoting, a great lake of water which was illy, I-L-L-Y, tasted. But it could not be passed either by boat or on foot or by horse. So what do you think Lewis and Clark did? My God, we're going to check it out. I'll bet we can do it. So Old Toby guided them skillfully. Clark, we split up. Lewis to trade for horses, Clark to find whether they can pass the salmon. What was the answer? You know that country? It's called the River of No Return to this day. The River of No Return. One of the deepest gorges in North America. But Clark went 22 miles, spent 4 days, but he came back really impressed with Old Toby. Toby knew. So he sent word then, won't work, get more horses, we're going to take the north fork of the salmon and go over this pass. Now let me show you this pass. And here's where the conflict of cultures and maybe Lewis and Clark's do or die attitude came into conflict. Today it's called Lost Trail Pass, not because Old Toby got them lost. Surveyors got lost up in there. So let's see. Okay, that's what it looks like today. That's an April shot. It is very confusing. A lot of times passes are very clear. You work your way up and up and up. You get to the top. It's real easy. You go down there. You can't go down there. Can't go down. You gotta go down there. But Lost Trail Pass, which is between Salmon, Idaho, and Darby, Montana, is confusing. It's almost like a plateau. There are many passes. You can't tell which way to go. Old Toby said, okay, our tribe goes this way. We follow a creek. We go up to the right here. We go over into the magnificent Big Hole Valley. We camp there. Then we go up over this pass and we meet the Salish-speaking Indians at Ross's Hole. We call it Ross's Hole today. Lewis, what? We're not going back east. We've gone out of our way enough. We've got to get to the Pacific before winter. We're going straight up there. Big mistake. Old Toby didn't know that way. Now, can you see, though, why Lewis and Clark were determined to go the shortest, most direct way? You've read enough about their temperament, their determination. So they get up in the North Fork of the Salmon. I wish I had, I've got some aerial shots of that, but I don't think I could take time to do that. But they got up the North Fork and they wrote in their journals that the horses slipped. They couldn't get over the down timber. The brush was bad. The mosquitoes were bad. The beaver ponds were awful. They were just complaining right and left. And Old Toby had tried to tell them. So now they get up to about the area of the ski. There's a ski area there now. And it had been raining, and perhaps it was cloudy and foggy, and they didn't know where to go. Bottom line is, they went off to the west. Now, Lewis Clark, they didn't want to go east, did they? They tried to go west. So what would you do? They got to hang west. You got to hang west. Old Toby's saying now, if you go too far east, you're going to drop off into the big old valley. So they west and higher, and they went, folks, 4 or 5 miles at least higher, 2,000 feet higher out of their way. But it wasn't Old Toby's fault, is my claim. Old Toby had never been there. It wasn't the route that any of the tribes took. So, they finally found their way down, and they did come down into a drainage of the Bitterroot and met a wonderful group of Indians, the Salish-speaking Indians, at Ross's Holt, which is a valley surrounded by mountains. And there's a famous painting of that. And they got more horses. So round 1, I give to Old Toby. The Corps would have been wiser to have followed his longer route. They'd have been in much better shape and saved time. So, Old Toby was right on the main fork of the Salmon. He was right at Lost Trail Pass. Now we go to, they went down the Bitterroot Valley, which is beautiful today. It's Darby and Hamilton. It's a tourist area. It's beautiful. This tent will be somewhere in the Dillon and Missoula area next year, I think, is when we get there. It is beautiful. There are log cabins for sale. There are mountains on both sides. A lot of it is burned up, by the way. And then the little town of Lolo, a creek comes in, and that's the creek. The Kamiawake said, take that creek and take that trail, and they camped there, and they called it Traveler's Rest. They know where the camp is because they found mercury in the latrine. Does anyone know why there would be mercury in the latrine? What? Medicine. For what? Everything. But including STDs. So, rested now, and after a few days of good weather, they head up the Lolo Trail. And on the classes, tours that I lead, we stop at 2 or 3 points on the Lolo Trail. First place is Howell Creek. Now, the Corps of Discovery starts out fine up the valley, and then the trail goes up into the mountains. And folks, when I say up, I mean up. And up to the ridge tops, only to have to drop down again at the first big drainage, which is Howard Creek. Oh, and they complained about that. They said, terrible trail, hard trail. And some of the stragglers didn't get into camp until 10 p.m. that night. And folks, this now is in late August, early September, and the days are getting shorter. So that means the last 2.5 hours, they would have been in full dark. They're having a tough time. But not Old Toby's fault. He's taking them on the trail. The trail now is the Ninipu Trail to the Buffalo, back and forth from western Idaho into the basins of Montana to hunt buffalo. Hundreds of ponies, back and forth, once or twice a year. An easy trail. The problem was the weather and the steepness. And Lewis and Clark had no idea that the mountains of Montana and Idaho could be this tough. Now, let's just show you what that looks like. Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay. There might even be some of you in here who have hiked this part of the trail with me. But now look off to the right. Can you see the steepness of the grade? Look up above. The rock outcrops. That's the trail, folks. You get off that trail, you're in big trouble. There's snow on that trail, you have problems. Some Nebraska teachers sitting on the rock outcrop. I take teachers and others who are in love with the story. Looking out, you see a vast. Now, where does it end? Where do the Bitterroots end? You look out from Long's Peak and you see the plains. But not here. You look out any direction and that is what you see. The Bitterroots are a big block that's been lifted up. The valleys are V-shaped. It is confusing. You break a leg hunting there in October, you're in big trouble. Blowdowns. They complain in the journals about the blowdowns. This is not Old Toby's fault. The Nez Perce knew they would just go around. So the trail was always changing to some extent depending on the blowdowns. So, there is one place that Old Toby got lost, and I'll admit it. Lolo Hot Springs. Have any of you been there? Sure, a beautiful place. It's commercial, it's tourist, but I don't care. It's beautiful. It's been a hunting lodge since the late 1800s. And they were there. The main spring is right where the building is. And Lewis and Clark stopped there, and then Old Toby got lost. Why did he get lost there? Well, I think he might have been there. I'll give him credit. The reason he got lost, I think, is there were too many trails. Why would there be too many trails at the Great Hot Springs? Well, all the wildlife came there. All the tribes came there. Everybody came there. And so you had trails from every direction. And he headed out probably on a game trail, or it could have been a trail from a tribe from the north. Okay. And after 2 or 3 miles, they realized, hey, this is not veering around like it's supposed to. It's supposed to stay close to the creek. And they got back on the right trail. And Lewis and Clark mentioned that in the journal that Old Toby took them out on the wrong trail. But that's understandable. Have you ever hiked and there are too many trails? That's more of a worry to me than no trail. Too many trails. If you don't really know where the trail is supposed to go, you are in trouble. Okay. Now, back on the trail, and they get to what Bill Clefton, our state poet. How many of you know Bill? Heard him read? Lives in Lincoln, our state poet. He wrote a whole book of poems about Lewis and Clark Trail. And he has a poem about this place. There is a meadow, it begins. Folks, I call this the world's most beautiful meadow in any season. Here it is, blue with a beautiful flower that the Indians depend upon, known as camas, or quamash, is how they wrote it in the journals. And there it is in winter. Beautiful then too. Now, with that picture of Wendover Ridge in the background, Toby had 2 choices. You take a somewhat easier but still rugged trail and go down to the beginning of the Lochsaw River. Anyone been along the Lochsaw? Now that's what Old Toby did. Why did he go down to the Lochsaw? Because that's where he had been. Because Shoshones probably could have gone up that eastern part of the trail and down into the headwaters of the Lochsaw to fish for salmon. They fished for salmon on the Lemhi Fort near Lemhi Pass. So why not on the Lochsaw? And he knew the Corps was hungry. So what makes more sense than to go the route that you knew to the fishing areas and to get fish for the coal. Now, the other way is the main way, supposedly the highway that sticks to the divide between the Locksaw and the North Fork of the Clearwater. Now, folks, I've seen that. That's where the Crooked Fire was in August of 2000. I saw the firefighters along the Highway 12. They wouldn't even go down that precipice, but that's where the trail went. So even had Old Toby taken them the highway, just west of the pass, down Crooked Creek and back up again, it would have been very difficult. So now he's down at the Locksaw, and he has only one way now to get back up to the high trail, and that is what we call today Wendover Ridge. It is the world's greatest hike on a ridge. Now the first mile is a little tough. The Nez Perce tribal members have been hired for the Forest Service to build big, long, beautiful switchbacks in that first mile, and you gain about 900 feet. But with that trail, it's not bad at all. I recommend to any of you who have good ankles, good knees, hiking boots or shoes. Then after that, you're on this ridge for about 10 more miles. And folks, this ridge is perfect. I've walked it in 3 different seasons. Just don't do it in tick season. That ridge goes all the way to the high trail, gains over 2,000 feet, almost 3,000 feet, and there's nary a deep saddle on the whole ridge. Just up, 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 a little bit level, up, up, up. Let me show you some more slides. Wendover Ridge is not often spoken of, but it is a truly great hike. And you get scenes 360 degrees, because you can look off both sides of the ridge. Most of those are Nebraskans, some are Hastings College students, some are teachers, and others from Nebraska, probably some there from the Omaha area. And I don't have this year's slides entered into my sorry. Oh, I will show this. I hiked, that's in April, and as, in a few more feet I start getting into snow. It had been raining and drizzling, and I'm all decked out in my gaiters and my rain parka, and I needed them. The only thing is, the ticks got into all my layers of clothing. So I really felt goosebumps, because I felt this must have been a day a lot like the day when Lewis Clark went up Wendover Ridge. And that's the river, the Locksaw River. Now I will close by saying that they were on the trail. The problem was, getting up Wendover Ridge was the weather. It was wet and cold and snowy, and they were short of food, and they were hungry. They had been in some beautiful areas. Packer Meadows, for example. The Locksaw River and the lodges, the hunting lodges along there. Be sure to stop and camp along there. And another problem was there was no water on the ridge. So they had to go high enough to get to snow, which they did, and that camp is called Snowbank Camp. Then many hard miles to go, but I don't think Old Toby knew that part, because it was the heart of Nez Perce country. It wouldn't have been safe. But the problem for Lewis and Clark was not staying on the trail. The problem was they were hungry. They killed colts. They ate their famous or infamous portable soup, a little bit like, I guess, bowling cubes. The men hated it. And finally, Lewis went on ahead, got to Wiyot Prairie, where they gorged on camas roots and salmon, and got so sick that they were laying about, and the Nez Perce could have slit their throats, taken their state-of-the-art Harper's Ferry rifles, but an old lady, Indian lady, said, "Oh, I know these people. I've heard that they healed people up at the man-dead villages. Don't hurt them." And so they helped. Now that's the end of my Old Toby story, with a quote from Tennyson, and then we have time for questions. I want to quote Tennyson. Here it is. My favorite poems. He closes, "One equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, and not to yield. And Lewis and Clark and Old Toby and the expedition refused to yield. They made it, and Old Toby was a huge help to them. Thank you. Now we have 7 minutes, so I'm pretty close. For a college professor who's used to 50 minutes, I did pretty good to stay within 35 or whatever it was. What are your questions? Yes?
Is this a map of where they were? Can you tell us on this map?
Oh, excuse me.
On this map here, or that map, whichever map, where were the events
okay,
that were today?
Were you here for the beginning part when I had the slide up? Oh, maybe I should go back to that slide. I think, well, those of you who saw that map slide, can I answer his question with that map slide better? I think so. It was 9. I give so many programs on so many different angles that it helps me to have all my slides in one program. Okay, here goes. The pointer will wake up. There it is. Okay. This is Helena. I'm right in there. And this is Lemhi Pass, where they met the Shoshone and Old Toby. This is about Lost Trail Pass, the first place I told you, where he said go right into the big hole. But they said, no, we're going direct, save time. We can do it. We're tough. And this is the high Ninipu Lolo Trail and Wendover Ridge and Packer Meadows and Lolo Hot Springs. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay, I'll repeat the question. The part of the trip that I'm talking about, the land part from Camp Fortunate near Dillon over to about Lewiston, Idaho, was probably about 250 miles. The whole thing, though, I have a student in here who could probably answer that. Anyone know the answer to the number of miles on the whole trip? It was 6,000 and something. Have you ever been to the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi north of St. Louis? Have you? Oh, go there. On the Illinois side, they have a visitor center now. You can walk back and you can look across the mighty Mississippi and see the Missouri coming in. And the Missouri is a presence. That river right there has such a strong current that it washed out the visitor center or the view center on the Illinois side. That current crossed all the way across the Mississippi and what an undercut the banks, didn't it? I don't know if they have it repaired yet.
How much money did Congress appropriate for the
Now we're into politics. Was it $2,500? About $2,500. But, oh, there's so many ways to go with that question. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about all that there. In the time that I have, I can't answer all the spin-off questions. Jefferson had been planning this venture ever since he wrote the Declaration of Independence, I'm convinced. He tried 4 times to mount an expedition. They failed. He brought Lewis into his administration, brought him into the White House. Lewis, you're the man. And Lewis was the man. He was smart. He was tough. He overspent. Lewis overspent. And part of the reason he got really down after the expedition and he was governor was that people were criticizing him for spending too much money. He couldn't get all of his vouchers honor. And he was on his way back to Washington, D.C. to defend himself in his handling of the monies when he committed suicide. At least he died. I think he committed suicide. Also, there's the whole Louisiana Purchase. And money for that was not approved to the extent. They borrowed from Dutch banks. So there you can say Jefferson was this, but he told first Livingston and Monroe, you try to get New Orleans and part of the Mississippi River. Nobody dreamed that Napoleon would sell the whole thing, except Jefferson and Napoleon were the two brains of the world political scene, and they were playing a giant chess game, and Jefferson won. Jefferson was one smart man. And Monroe there, and with Monroe signing the agreement, see, Congress would more likely approve. Very, very interesting politics here. Some of the New Englanders didn't like it too well because they thought the new states that would come in for the Louisiana Purchase would vote unlike them and more like Virginia. Now, I took too long to answer that question. But we have time for one more. One more really tough question. As a college professor, that's what we thrive on. We get the tough questions in lieu of salary.
By the time Jefferson died, was all this money paid back?
That is a tough one. Her question is, by the time Jefferson died, had all this money been paid back for the Louisiana Purchase? I have no idea. We may still be paying for it. Wow. I need to give you a special pin. That you can't even make a try. Except they borrowed from Dutch banks, and it was paid over time. Don't know what the interest was, but I've read the document. I'm not so sure it says the interest rate. And there was plenty of discussion about approving it, but it was approved, and by a wide margin. Yeah. And by the way, Jefferson died on July 4th, the same day as one of our other great founding fathers, who were friends, then enemies, and then fast, and they died on the same day. That'd be a good place for me to conclude. It's 10 till, well, 11 till, give me credit. It's 11 till, 1 minute early. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out and speaking today. It was a wonderful presentation. Next program, Inside of the Tent of Many Voices, will start at 11 o'clock.
Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm not a historian, so I'm a fisheries biologist by trade. So for those of you who were sitting here a few minutes ago listening to the professor from Hastings College, I probably won't be quite that eloquent, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Missouri River and what some people, i.e. government employees who are working for all of you, are doing to help make the river better. We operate over the concept of a public trust concept, and just the nitty-gritty, you don't have to read all that thing, but what that means is you have state and federal agencies that have the responsibility to look after resources that belong to all of you. And the reason we have that in this country is because when we were revolting against England many years ago, over there, only the rich people and all the land barons owned all the resources. They owned the land. All the fish and wildlife belonged to those powerful people. And when our forefathers created the United States of America, they said, we don't quite like that model, so we'd like to change it a little bit so that everybody gets a piece of the action. And i.e., they made all the resources, fish, wildlife, air, and many of the lands public, which means you all have a stake in it. Our goal For the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission is intimately involved with natural resources in the state of Nebraska. For the Missouri River, our goal is to restore, protect, and maintain the diversity of historic Missouri River habitats, resources, and ecosystem functions in order that present and future generations may enjoy them. And maybe if you don't quite understand what all those ecosystem functions are, don't worry about it. I'll explain a little bit, and hopefully you'll pick it up. This is what the Missouri River looks like in Montana above Great Falls. It's a cold, clear stream. It's probably outside of the road. It's probably what Lewis and Clark saw when they went upstream. When I was there a few years back, there were so many trout in the river that about every quarter to a half mile in the summer, people were out there with their fly rods and spinning reels catching trout. It's a real popular area, lots of resources to enjoy. Canoeing, kayaking, also all those other activities. Great Falls, Montana. Many of you probably heard this is one of the great portages of the Lewis and Clark expedition. But now, right above the falls, they put a dam across it right in the city of Great Falls. And so they've kind of raised the level a little bit. And I think there's a hydro plant next to it. But anyway, this is the Great Falls. Lewis and Clark would have saw animals like this. Elk. This was real close to Fort Peck. The two animals on the left are like 4 and 5 point bulls. And the big bull on the right is a royal elk, 7 points on each side. So this would be one of the native species that they saw, and of course, consumed along the way. The Missouri River has 6 big dams on it since Lewis and Clark. They put them in there since 1942. They've got Fort Peck in Montana, Sakawea in North Dakota, Hawaii in South Dakota, Big Bend, Randall in South Dakota, and Gavin's Point Dam in Nebraska. This happens to be Fort Peck. It's the biggest reservoir. It is basically about 25 to 30 feet down now. The river is managed, and the water is managed for navigation for this river right out here. It goes up and down. So we've got, of those 6 reservoirs, we've got 3 big ones and then 3 little ones. And the lowermost one is the littlest. But these reservoirs actually cover up the historic Missouri River. The total, approximately 2,400 miles in the river. About a third of it is under reservoirs like this. And a third of it is channelized like you have right out here. And a third of it is somewhat in its natural state. And I'll show you a picture. One of the big issues in this day and age is how much water we should leave in the river. It just so happens that these reservoirs are so big that they make a drastic impact. But they've been lowering the reservoirs so that they can put water out here for navigation. That's one of the many purposes. They have others. Power, water supply, navigation, fish and wildlife, flood control, generation of electricity. About a mile downstream from Fort Peck Dam, there is a river called the Mill. And it is so turbid, it almost looks about as brown as that sign right in the back of the room. But this is a tributary. The water in the Missouri nowadays is relatively clear compared to what it was during the Lewis and Clark expedition. The reason it's clear is because we have the reservoirs. The reservoirs trap the sediment on the upper end, and they release clean water below the dam. And the clean water picks up sediment and moves it downstream. One of the species of great concern on the river nowadays is the little pallid sturgeon. It's a native species. It's been here forever. It's a prehistoric species. It's on the endangered species list. And this is one of the things that a lot of people are concerned about. I always tell people, well, are you really concerned about that species? I said, yes, I am, because we do have statutory and management responsibilities. But what we're really concerned about is what's causing the decline of the species. And that's usually, I say, endangered species are the canaries in the mine. They're indicators that something's wrong. And you'll get to hear me talk a little more about that as we go along. Fort Randall Dam is the second largest dam. It's right across the border from Nebraska in South Dakota. That's a downstream view. Pretty much the river looked like this when Lewis and Clark came upriver. Here's a upstream view, but on the downstream side of the dam, you see the sediment? It's picking up. There's a process in the river that's called degradation. And what it does is the river picks up sediment from the sides and the bottom and deposits them downstream. And then that's called degradation. And the location where the sediment is deposited is called aggradation. It's a natural phenomenon. Rivers do two things. They move water and sediment from the mountains to the sea. And of course, we're all kind of in between. We talked about the clear water below Fort Randall Dam. You go there in a boat, you can look 3 to 4 feet down in the water, and you can see it relatively clear. And that's how I'm looking about 3 feet into the water to see the bottom of the spot. The between Lewis and Clark Lake and Fort Randall is a Missouri River National Record. This is the 39-mile reach. Below Gavin's Point Dam, there's a 59-mile reach called, and that's also part of the National Park System. The lands you see right here, I just took these pictures a couple weeks ago. These are the same scenes that Lewis and Clark would have seen as they went upstream. It's not real clear. You can see it. This little hill right here is Old Baldy in Boyd County, Nebraska. And if you get out on the river, you can see it. And Clark, after looking at it, he said, we landed near the foot of Round Mountain, which I saw yesterday resembling a dome. Captain Lewis and myself walked up to the top, which forms a cone, and is about 70 feet higher than the higher lands around it. The base is about 300 feet, and descending this cupola, discovered a village of small animals that burrow in the ground. Prairie dogs. This was the first time we saw prairie dogs. But this is all on private land, but if you're in the boat, you can see it. About 7 miles below Fort Randall, there's some natural stone, and we refer to it as a spawning bed stone, because historically, some of the native species would run up and down the river, and they would spawn on this rock, especially paddlefish, sauger, and sturgeon. One of the things Lewis and Clark and the expedition saw was many of these big root wads that came from a cottonwood tree that just fell in the river. It was a common occurrence. This happens to be one that is still in the river, and it's at the Boyd County line in northern Nebraska. We just have, our agency has a boat ramp right next to it. You can see there's a boat right here. But this root wad is so big. And when it gets in the river, it's not lost. It's a form of carbon, and it'll maybe last 100 years. But it'll slowly decay away and release its nutrients into the environment. Of course, there's other things in that 39-mile reach. These are national river sections, so they have many of the scenic values of a wild and scenic river. Some of the lands along the way, this is actually in Nebraska on the south side. We're about 10 or 12 miles downstream. You can't see it very good, but the water is still pretty much kind of clear greenish, and that's a difference between when Lewis and Clark came and what we have in this day and age. The water usually would be turbid historically, but now we have somewhat of a greenish clear water. Just more of the scenes. We have some really scenic banks along the river. You really get to feel like you're in a wild and scenic river when you either take a boat or canoe down. One of the things we've done is we're trying to make the river accessible to people. And it was only 10, 20 years ago, everybody was complaining, yeah, it's a nice river, but we can't get to it. So our agency developed a program, and put in boat ramps public boat ramps every 10 to 20 miles. And our goal was actually one every 20-25. So our objective was to get access so people could go out and enjoy the river. Sandbars were a real common feature in the historic Missouri River. You can see some of the sedges and grasses and rhizomes and little cottonwood seeds. They're part of that degradation process. Sandbar formation was really good for fish habitat. And Lewis and Clark actually camped on quite a few of them, if you read the journals. Right in this general area, we're kind of right below Ponca State Park. We've got eagles that are nesting on the river now. These are 2 young ones that have fledged out of the nest and they're just about ready to fly. We also have people fishing for smallmouth bass. And we have lots of waterfowl, including these pelicans. That bank just happens to be at the Standing Bear Bridge, going from Nebraska over into South Dakota. So it is in South Dakota, but these types of banks are historically part of the landscape and terrain, and Lewis and Clark would have stopped, I'm sure, to look at it and observe it. I talked about that aggradation process. We're trying to keep this a living ecosystem. Well, what's happened is below Fort Randall is that clean water has picked up sediment from the sides and the bottom of the river and moved it downstream for about 30 some miles and stacked it up on the upper end of Lewis and Clark Lake. And so this is all that sediment that's been in the river, kind of just been packed in there for about 50 years. Now, here's the mouth of the Niobrara right here. And it dumps about 55% of the sediment into the Missouri River. And the sediment is coming from the watershed. Even though the Niobrara River has a lot of grasslands and everything, it still provides about 55% of the sediment into the Missouri. And the rest of the sediment is coming from a couple of tributaries up in this area, and also the river proper, the Missouri River. Talked about that sediment. I was up there on a sunny day. You can see the sediment coming in. This would be a view from Ponca State Park. There was an